Good evening, everyone. Brian with BMK Magic Explorations. I've been promising before, even though we've done, I think one or two little book reviews, to also review some films that go somewhat along magical themes. So, I had just watched one which I used to own and thought would be a very good first start here. So here we go. You probably won't get a video from me as a night video too often, but I've got some other things on my agenda. Have to be kind of busy early in the morning, and so just wouldn't have time to get this out as early morning production. So little exception here. Anyway, the film is Pathfinder, which has a bit of a Native American and Norseman or Viking theme to it. And it's pretty much what you would call a kind of historical fantasy in a way. And, as we're going to see here, although despite that, after I kind of go over the synopsis and all, and a few other details, we'll see that there are some details which might be a little bit more. They might have some correspondence with some historical elements that we have a good idea about, or a fair one anyway. Now, I want to say that part of the reason why I chose this one first, although it doesn't have as much of the straight-up magical elements at all, is partially because something that goes along something historical towards, even historical fantasy towards, what we might consider something paleo-pagan, or, although not quite in the same category, with Native Americans, they have their own magical practices and such, so it still kind of makes sense, and it's kind of fun to get into that some, and it does have a little bit of the magical stuff to it, just not a lot. And one of the other reasons is, and I want to give a shout out here to my Facebook group, All Pagan, Norse, and Heathens, whom I'm not sure if the administrators in the group will choose to approve this video. I'm going to try it and see, which I will say I'm doing so more as another form of participation rather than self-promotion, as I feel there may be some in this group who might find this little video somewhat interesting and entertaining, so I'll try it and see what happens, but regardless, it will be available on my BMK Magic Explorations page, besides here on YouTube, so we'll just have to see what happens with it. Anyway, with this one, it has a runtime. This one, the original version was released at about 99 minutes, 1 hour 39 minutes. This one is and I did own a copy back when I was still living in my adopted mother and stepfather's home, but after I left there, I left a lot of stuff behind, and I just, as you might have seen in one of my recent local pickup videos, I just acquired this one recently, and it happens to be the unrated edition, or unrated version, which actually has about an extra 8 minutes, extending it to about 147 minutes, or 107 minutes, which is an hour 47 minutes long. It was released in 2007, and unfortunately it was up against some other things like 300 at the box office and such, and didn't do terribly well. It didn't do super bad. It had a budget of $45 million, and made back from the box office $30.8 million, though later on it made that up with DVD sales somewhat, with an approximate DVD sales estimate of about $22 million. So that would be overall about, let me see here, $52.8 million. Yeah, not too terrible, even though still not super successful. And it was not so super well reviewed by critics. I think it was on Rotten Tomatoes only gave it 9% and Metacritic 29%, and said it may appeal to metalheads some, which with some of the themes, music, and visuals, I can see that. But really, if you happen to be interested in, say, like in modern neo-paganism, heathenry and such, it's actually a pretty good watch. I mean, the Native American side is, like I said, one thing, and then they're also up against Vikings, or Norsemen, which is also interesting, though it's kind of sad if you're into heathenry or Germanic, Nordic, or Norse neo-paganism, whatever, see them as the bad guys, but then again, they were traditionally known as more of, how do you say, kind of raiders, conquerors, and that sort of thing. I mean, they usually kind of would have been the bad guys. So that's not entirely inaccurate anyway, so it is what it is. Anyway, as for synopsis and all, basically it kind of starts out showing us a brief opening with the earlier Viking raid on the, they're not quite Inuit, but Proto-Inuit peoples. They don't really say, but they're probably what were known as the Thule, which were kind of their ancestors and predecessors and preceded them. And, it just gives us a little intro with that. It's pretty gory and such. But afterwards, the next scene kind of switches over to seeing a woman who stumbles upon a ship of theirs, which looks like it's been beached or shipwrecked, and she kind of, after she finds this white horse, which apparently belonged to them originally, and it leads her over this way, and she finds that, decides to explore around inside, finds that everybody's dead, either from the ship being beached or shipwrecked, and the visuals make it look like probably also from being counterattacked by the local Thule people, so as there are obviously some wounds and such that would have been deaths that would have been combat caused, not just from being shipwrecked and beached. Though there's no real explanation how that happened to the ship. Who knows? Bad storm or something hit, and your guess would be as good as mine. Anyway, she finds in there a small young boy who's holding a sword on her. He looks like he's about 5 or 6. And he's apparently the only survivor. And she basically takes a couple fingers and pushes the sword aside, seeing that he's really upset too, and just pulls him into an embrace, puts a pelt on him, I guess to keep him warm, and takes him back. And her husband, who is an elder, along with the others, are first like, oh, we can't let him stay. He may well turn into a monster just like them. And then she comes in, having been kind of off, not quite in the room, but enters and had been overhearing them, as like, well, he's a boy. If we were to turn him out, we would be really no better monsters than they are. And they all decide she has kind of a point, and even though nothing's really said about it, maybe they're thinking, hey, if these guys return again, he might just turn out to be some type of, asset against them, something like that. So, it's decided to let him stay, and next little scene shows, with his new adoptive parents in the tribe, he has kind of a nightmare, which is kind of a flashback showing during the earlier part of the Viking raids, him doing some slaughter, and his apparent Norseman father telling him to take his sword and murder one or so of them, and he shakes his head no and refuses, dropping the sword, and gets backhanded by the father, who claims, you're no son of mine. And then he wakes up, finds the sword of his father's, which he actually did keep, and he starts, using it and all, so we can guess that over time he probably, what skills up to maybe about 5 or 6 and knowledge he had of swordplay he retained and probably kept, working on. So kind of next scene just shows, that the shows him as an adult, and he's played by Carl Urban. And next scene kind of shows a visit by one of the other neighboring tribes from a neighboring village, which includes his love interest, Starfire, played by Moon Bloodgood, and her father, the tribe's Pathfinder, who's basically a person who helps them find safe and paths from one place to another, and knows how to get from place to place, that type of thing. And also is kind of like, in a medicine man or shamanistic role. Knows medicine, knows what little bit of magic they have, that type of thing. And basically, there's a little bit showing, some interactions between them and all. Including a part where, the Pathfinder, the Braves are in there and being paid up to go hunting, war party, whatever, and he is told that he has not yet earned this right and really shouldn't be there, as the daughter, Starfire, starts to pain him too, but the father says no, he hasn't earned this yet. Even though he's otherwise socially accepted into the tribe and has grown up to adulthood with them, he still just hasn't proven himself as a warrior yet. So he wouldn't count as a brave. And by the way, because he's lighter complexion than them and not originally of their tribe, he is named Ghost. So anyway, in one of the next scenes, going forward, is where we get a little bit of the next magic scenes. The elder, the adopted father of Ghost, and the Pathfinder, who is actually played, I should mention, by Russell Means, are discussing some things, and he's watching Ghost, and then they go into a hut or so, and he takes some, it looks like, kind of rune casting or some type of lot casting, and the father asks Pathfinder, what do you see from what he just cast? And he basically says, destiny, as regards Ghost. Although it's not really made any more clear about that. And there's also a little interaction with Ghost with another guy who's interested in Starfire, but who she could care less about, and that type of thing. But anyway, Ghost goes with who, I guess it's not really specified, maybe a younger sister of his, or younger adoptive sister of his, and a dog, and he goes out to go hunting. And in the process of this, she and the dog are kind of off on their own, although he's supposed to be watching them. And suddenly we get the return of another Viking conquest or raiding party, which what they're there to do kind of becomes clear is they're intent upon finding and wiping out these Thule Proto-Inuit people in order so that they can take the land and settle it for themselves. Which kind of makes sense. I mean, it has everything from, furs or pelts to other good natural resources, fish, game, timber, and all. And again, Vikings wouldn't have been the types who really would want to be diplomatic about this very much. They're more the types to come in and raid, plunder, conquer. So it kind of makes sense. Anyway, the young girl runs it. We get a scene where the dog begins barking and growling at something, and the young girl is grabbed by the throat through a Viking. We can't see much more than his arm. The rest of him is kind of off screen. And I didn't see what happened, but he lets her go and starts laughing, and she starts running back towards the village. And that leads them straight there, and everyone there is slaughtered. Then Ghost apparently returns, having realized something is wrong. He kind of heard one of the, big trumpet type horns, that they actually use like a horn to sound off with the Vikings. And makes him realize something's wrong, and he decides to come back towards the village. He discovers his dead mother, and that also his adoptive father is there, has been given a sword, and is being toyed with, as these people don't know how to use swords. They don't make or have them. And he's trying his best to try to figure out how to fight with it, and fight back, and in the end is basically slaughtered by the leader of the Vikings named Gunnar, played by Clancy Brown, who says that these people are our hosts. We should treat them with honor, and then basically runs him through the sword and says, such as death death by sword, which is... But anyway, at that point, Ghost basically comes up and all, and they catch hold of him and decide to see if he knows any better than the others didn't how to use a sword. And, well, as I said, he's apparently still been messing with the one from his Viking father he kept, which he somewhat knew how to use before, and he basically gets into it with Ulfar, who is the second in command to Gunnar, played by Ralph Moeller. That's Moeller. Sorry if I slurred that pronunciation. And basically manages to cut one of his eyes out, though he doesn't kill him. And then basically he manages to make an escape where he takes off. Actually does manage to kill a few of them in the process of all this. Sneak up to one of their little encampments, steal a little bit of their armor and all, and a sled, and takes off and tries to escape. Though he gets shot kind of in the back below his shoulder with one of their arrows in the process. And it kind of becomes clear to Gunnar that this one knows their ways. He's not like the others. He knows how to use a sword. Anyway, a bit later on, he's hiding in something of a cave, and the Pathfinder and Starfire, along with some others from the other village, happen along and find him, and they take him back to their village. Pardon me a moment, I just need to check something. Okay, just had to make sure I have my air conditioning on. Kind of hot this time of year. Anyway, there he's taken up into the Pathfinder's hut, which is up in this big tree, and he uses his medicine skills to treat him, remove the arrowhead from his shoulder, which, of course, with the Vikings are made out of metal. I'm guessing either iron or steel, no, not sure. And then Starfire kind of stays behind to comfort him. And then the next morning, the tribe and all are basically discussing what all they should do, and it's being pointed out that he's one of them, not one of the Vikings, and he's been fighting back against them. And they all decide they want to offer to join him and stand with him and fight. And he basically takes the sword which he's got, which, not his original, but one which he apparently took, the one that he was given when the Vikings decided to try and find out if he could use a sword. Well, he cuts off a spearhead from one of their spears easily and tells them, he's like, these people have weapons that are tipped with, like their spears, their axes, their arrowheads are made of metal. Their armor is a combination of kind of, metals and leather, hard leathers, maybe some woods, and their shields and all. The weapons you have, which are, he didn't say it quite like this, but are basically a combination, like clubbing, bludgeoning type weapons, spears and arrowheads, or arrows for their bows, tipped with arrowheads, and the spear tips are stone, and tries to make a point to them, these are not weapons which will easily, if at all, pierce their armor. It's not going to really do any good. But he's vengeful over the loss of his adoptive parents and his own village, so he's going off on his own to try to kill as many of them as he can. So, anyway, a mute one named Jester, even though it's not given on screen, played by Kevin Loring, even though he tells him to just go back and not follow him, tries to follow him, while the Pathfinder has decided that the rest should take his advice and go towards their, I forget if it was spring or summer quarters, which is over a mountain and further inland, to try to get some safety. Well, he and this Jester go to a place which looks kind of like the caves where he was found, but it's really kind of a burial ground place for the tribe. And in the woods and all there, they pretty much set up a whole bunch of punji stake style ambush traps and stuff, and intend to lure the Vikings there or wait for them to come through there and then ambush them and kind of use guerrilla warfare to take out as many as they can. At the same time, both the Starfire and apparently also the Pathfinder have turned away from the rest of the tribe and come to join them. This takes a bit to happen. And a scene that's really not that explicit at all, the Starfire, she gets there first, and they end up, she's like, trying to tell him, are you going to choose to live through hatred or through love? And they end up making love and all. Anyway, then kind of later on the next morning, is when he's awakened by the Pathfinder, who's holding a spear on him while he's holding basically a small knife on him. And Pathfinder's like, hey, you have a knife, I have a spear, so. And he'd also appeared to him in his dreams in a vision, trying to give him, like another choice, kind of like she was telling him. Anyhow, then the Vikings come through and they get basically ambushed, and although Gunnar is not entirely stupid, though they do manage to kill with arrows and such a few of them, or at least wound them. And some of the traps, they end up getting sprung on. When they're going to spring one on kind of the last ones, well, some of the other warriors who had decided, the Braves from the party who decide they're going to go back and help because of Starfire and the guy's crush on her, show up and not realizing about all of this, all these traps and all, because why would they know? Well, Gunnar has already told his men, apparently suspecting something isn't right with this, to wait, as Ghost is standing there holding the decapitated head of one of theirs, apparently trying to get them riled up to just charge at him, and Gunnar says, no, wait. Which, the dialogue from them is all pretty much in the Old Norse language, so, or it's supposed to be. It's subtitled. I mean, if it wasn't, I couldn't tell you what they were saying. Anyway, these other Braves come up and decide basically to go ahead and jump the gun and charge the Vikings, and a good number of them end up in the punji stake pits. Then the battle kind of moves back towards the Burial Grounds kind of cave and cliff setting, where the one Jester by Kevin Loring loses his footing and gets slaughtered by one of the Vikings. It's all kind of gruesome and all. And then in the end of this, the Pathfinder, Starfire, and Ghost are all basically captured, and they try to get the Ghost. They're going to torture him by drawing and quartering him, and this still won't get the Ghost to give up the location of the next village, which he is just not going to do, and he knows, excuse me, the Pathfinder wouldn't want him to do anyway. So the Pathfinder gets ripped in two, and then when Gunnar takes Starfire, puts a dagger up to, like he's going to slit her throat, is what convinces him to at least feign that he will lead them there, and she kind of slaps him for agreeing to do this, not realizing he kind of has a plan. Anyways, they're going over the same mountain pass and all. Well, there was one safe route to the east and one to the west. He decides to lead them over to the less safe one. And in the process, they end up trying to cross some frozen ice, which he knows is not entirely stable. And he even tries to warn them it would be better to just walk around the ice. Well, the idiot Ulfer, second in command, decides, hey, we're not cowards. We're just going to go straight across. And, of course, with their heavy armor and equipment, more of them than not go through the ice and drown and die. And also, so does Ghost, but he gets another vision from the now deceased Pathfinder, who tells him, you're not finished yet. And so he manages to make his way up. The other Vikings break him out of the ice, retrieve him. He starts leading them over the pass, and he tries to warn them, we should cross tied together because it's steep, it's not safe. And they initially don't listen until one of theirs loses his footing and goes for a death plunge straight down the mountain side, and then they decide to take ropes and tie each other all together. But then after a while, the Ghost, he has this kind of slingshot and a big rock in it, and he uses it to. He first gets Starfire to try to pick a fight with him and make it seem like he's going to hit and hurt her. And he just fakes it. He takes out basically this sling with a shot, and the shot basically hits straight knocks off the last Viking in their line, and he and the others basically all tied up start to go plummeting down the mountainside. They're not immediately dead yet, but Gunnar manages to keep a hold and tries to get himself back up, and eventually does. While although she resists, Ghost tells Starfire to just run, leave. He'll be fine, even though he's also being kind of pulled from being tied to Gunnar. But they both make their way back up. Ghost loses his sword, and basically Gunnar's like trying to give this lecture about, you should just remember who you are. You're one of us. Why don't you act like it? And basically, Ghost yells, I do know who I am, and realizes that's starting to cause an avalanche, so he says it again, and it does cause an avalanche, which comes down on the remaining Vikings who aren't dead, Gunnar, and not quite himself. And even though Gunnar survives, they have a little bit of a brief fight where he basically stabs him and sends him over the mountain, and that's the end of it. The other natives think that he was killed in all this, but he shows up and gets embraced by Starfire, basically, and he gives her back an item which is symbolic of a Pathfinder, like her father, which he was in the process of trying to choose the next one. Well, she sort of gives us an ending synopsis, which is she became the next Pathfinder. That was her destiny, apparently. And as for Ghost, she's also holding a baby, which is apparently pride between the two of them. And Ghost is shown up on a coastal area watching out, and she says, he found his place, apparently, which he'd been looking for. Who he was, which is not her exact words, but she kind of explains it's not that he's necessarily one of the Thule, except for being adopted into them and considering himself one of theirs, while at the same time he knows that he was born as a Viking, and so he kind of exists between both and has figured out that his place is to constantly keep watch for any possible future return of the Vikings. And she kind of ends it by saying that he changed both her life and the fate of their people, and that's where the credits kind of start to roll, and it's fun, kind of interesting. Now, like I said, there is a little bit of a historical background to this, though it's not. Again, this is more or less a fictionally adapted work and not supposed to be taken that seriously. But anyway, Bjarni Herjolfsson, forgive me if I'm slaughtering these names because I wouldn't know how to pronounce them for sure. Well, after, Leif Erikson had basically sailed Greenland, he's out on an expedition that gets blown off course, and he spots, at least, North America, a new land he doesn't know, goes back and reports that, and that causes Leif Erikson to come with an expedition which settles it for at least one winter, and even builds 3 big houses, about in what becomes known in Vinland. I should note this might end up being a little bit of a two-parter, since it's running kind of long. I'm going to try to hurry through it. Then later on, his brother Thorvald comes back for another one, which, for whatever reason, they end up getting slaughtered in the process. I mean, they slaughter about 9 natives who they find. 8 of them they find sleeping under their canoes, and retaliation comes after they apparently somehow or other get, kind of like in the film, their ship gets beached, and they slaughter them all there. And later on, he dies in the process defending the ships. Then Thorfinn Karlsefni, I guess, comes back with about 3 ships, 140 men, and they establish the first more stable permanent colony where they do clash with the natives some a bit, but they kind of develop a little bit friendly relations with them some, where they won't trade them, say, their spears or sword shields or anything like that, but they will trade them red cloth for pelts. And by the way, their name for the Thule, the Vikings' name for them was, or the Norsemen's was, the Skraeling, which is what they basically called anybody they considered a savage or barbarian. And anyway, this all happened somewhere in the 900 AD century, so it was about 500 years before Columbus, so there's your little bit of historical context. Anyway, I hope everyone who might have decided to watch this may have enjoyed this video some. I certainly did, even though it's not the best regarded. But if you're, like I said, if you're kind of into heathenry or Native Americans and their type of magic, or, you know, any type of that stuff from paleo-paganism or such, this is actually kind of a decent watch. It's pretty interesting. I mean, there are things that are deadly inaccurate, like the horns on the Vikings' helmets and such, but, otherwise, it's not supposed to be 100% accurate. It's a good watch. It's nice, action-packed, has a little bit of magic to it, and I would recommend it for anyone who haven't seen it. In the meantime, if you enjoy this channel's content, please feel free to like, share, and subscribe. And please don't hesitate to leave any questions, comments, or suggestions on the comment section below. I hope I and this channel have brought a little more magic into your lives with this video. And I also hope that I will see everyone back here again for the next one. Take care, blessed be, and have a wonderful Monday. And, well, I guess we're about to go into Tuesday, so wonderful Tuesday too. Take care, everyone.